Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guests today are Vandana Grover, Senior Director, Head of Digital Strategy and Innovation at Eisai, and Stev Tomich, Lead Omni Channel Strategist at AbbVie. And we discuss the value of social listening for MSL success. Great conversation. This is one of those episodes where I know you guys are going to want to take notes and you're definitely going to want to share it with others. So thank you for joining us, and we appreciate all of your support for this show. Hey guys, welcome to the MSL Talk podcast, a show specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. If you get value from these episodes, please click the subscribe button and share this with others. Tell all your friends. Thank you for all your support. Okay, Stevan, Vandana, how are you guys? Welcome to the podcast.
Doing well, thank you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, guys, super excited about this. This is, I think you guys are going to love this topic. We're going to talk about social listening. And the reason social listening has come up is because we have a very special sponsor for this episode, and that sponsor is Medical Watch. So I don't know if you're familiar, but Medical Watch helps you understand what HCPs are saying about your products and diseases on social media. So, guys, you're always asking me for resources, and I'm always getting messages about what resources. Medical Watch is definitely a resource you guys should register for. So, if you go to medical.watch, you can sign up for free. So, check this out. Definitely an important resource. So, before we get into the social listening topic, why don't we do some introductions? Vandana, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thanks again for the invite, Tom. Pleasure to be here. So I'm the Senior Director for Digital Strategy and Innovation for Global and US Medical Affairs at Eisai. And just a caveat, throwing it out there so we can get this out of the way, the views I express today are my own and do not necessarily reflect the position or views of my employer.
Awesome. Thank you. And Steph, you go next.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. My name's Stev. I'm a pharmacist by training, and I currently work in Omni Channel Strategy at AbbVie, supporting our oncology business unit as well as our specialty business unit. And similarly, the views expressed are my own and not that of AbbVie Pharmaceuticals.
Awesome. Well, guys, this is such an important topic, and it's one that comes well, I shouldn't say it comes up all the time, but I'm always being asked about what ways we can use social media and technology within the medical affairs space. So this social listening concept is not one that we've covered yet. So I'm excited to bring it into this platform. So my first question is, how are successful and social media savvy MSLs going about social listening? So let's start with you, Vandana.
Yeah, so I think first is just understanding the importance of social listening. And I think, we've been hearing about it for a few years. Different groups are doing it in different ways, but it is important and it is relevant. So we want to make sure that as an MSL that they're definitely aware of that. And if you look at some data that's been out there for the last couple of years, some from MAPS, the Medical Affairs Professional Society, it's showing that 37% of physicians under 55 use social networks and about 25% over 55. And a more recent report from McKinsey shows that 42% of US HCPs spend at least 2 hours a day on social media sites. So there's a pretty good chance that within the MSL's territory, especially if they are in the US, their HCPs are active on social. And if they're not maybe actively posting, they are probably reading what other people and what their colleagues are saying. So I think there are a few different ways that savvy MSLs go about social listening. It would depend a little bit on how their company is structured, but you can do it at an individual level. You follow the active HCPs and those HCPs that are in your territory on the various social channels that they participate in. You can do it as a department or as a team effort. Maybe there's a specific social listening team that's going through these insights regularly, weekly, for that therapeutic area and putting that together and consolidating that. So maybe you're reading those reports. And then there are also platforms and tools that if you have access to, they can really help aggregate those social listening insights. It's really hard to keep up, I think, with all your HCPs what everyone's saying on social. So if you can check in maybe once a week or right before an important meeting or conference, check one of these platforms or tools out. You could filter by trial name, maybe by product, the HCP's name. So that could help you also kind of keep up with what is going on social channels.
I'll tell you, I'm glad you shared statistics because those numbers are higher than I would have thought. And it's interesting because we've talked about this kind of sort of on this podcast um, in the past, but this conversation right now is very different than 4 years ago because those statistics would have been way less. So I think we're coming into a time when social media channels have been adopted. HCPs are out there on social media. It's just becoming a thing. It's like everybody is kind of involved. So, Stev, what would you say as far as like what are the most relevant social media channels right now, and where would MSLs need to be listening?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, you got to be on Twitter or X because that's where scientific exchange is happening. When I was in MSL, I wanted to do my pre-call planning. I'd see if anything was published. I'd see if they had spoken at a conference, or I remember that recently. That was all planned. That was all staged. That was not what they wanted to say, right? This is them saying what they want to say to the point where it's almost expected in some institutions now that you have an X account, just like it's expected you publish a little bit. They want that visibility, not only for the HCP themselves, but for that account itself. And then as age demographics change, you're seeing more and more doctors on TikTok. If it's a visible disease state, oncology, probably not going to be on Instagram that much. But let's say you're in the dermatology space, the rheumatology space, people are using those videos and those platforms on Instagram. And then from an institution level, if you're covering, you got that whole institution in your territory, especially if it's one of the biggest in the country, they probably have a YouTube channel and they probably have a lot of their HCPs on that YouTube channel showing what they care about to their patients. And taking that in, it decides some additional insights that I can bring back in, but also how I'm going to make my call. If I thought that, the HCP knew this, but then he explained it on a YouTube video or explained it to another physician differently than how I believe the data goes, or what, we can have discuss that and go into a little bit more detail and have that ready for that conversation.
Yeah, because if you miss it, if it's clearly out there and it's obvious and you miss it, you're failing, right? You're going in and you may be talking about something where I've had MSL say to me on this podcast, I went in with an agenda, said this, and the HCP said to me, well, clearly you didn't read my article. Clearly you didn't see my video. Clearly you didn't this. So that just goes to show how important. But Vandana, getting back to you, when it comes to the social listening process, is there like a structure that MSLs need to follow, for lack of a better word?
Well, I just want to follow up on one thing that you mentioned. Just like we used to see, make sure we looked at their publications. Are they a PI in a clinical trial? Are they presenting at a conference? This is just a place that we also need to look at and make sure we incorporate that in any of the pre-call planning, as Stefan mentioned. So I think in terms of structure, again, I think it depends a little bit on how your organization is set up. If you don't have any formal structure, I would consider following HCPs on these channels, all the channels that Stefan mentioned. And then not just your HCPs that are part of your territory, but also the HCPs that have a bigger maybe share of voice. They are digital leaders. Because if one HCP is thinking about something, probably another one may not be active, but is probably thinking the same thing or has those similar questions. I mentioned some of the platforms and tools. Those are also considerations to kind of add as a next step. Reading any reports that come out around social listening, even if it's outside of medical affairs. Sometimes you'll get reports from your business intelligence team. They're also looking at insights across social channels. So maybe they're picking up something. So make sure that you're checking that. And then right before your meeting, I would take a look at that HCP's profile and see, did they say something just like you mentioned? So it's not missed, and what they're thinking about. And then if there's any new data that's just come out, that's relevant to you and your space? What are people thinking about that? What are they saying? That might give you an idea of some of the questions they may have and help you prep for your meeting.
So as I'm listening to you guys, two things come to mind. I actually had somebody on my podcast and he said that you need to meet KOLs where they live. So as we're talking about it, is it safe to say that each of your HCPs are just going to have different preferences for where they're going to hang out, and it's your job to find it?
Definitely. I have to jump in as the omni channel. That's the whole point. That's the biggest difference between multi-channel and omni channel. Multiple channels being in a lot of places. Omni channels knowing that your doctor is going to be on this channel, and that's when they're going to need the right message at the right time.
Got you. So then let's talk about, and as I'm listening to you guys and I'm hearing of the importance, how important this is and how much you can learn. What are some examples of insights that MSLs can attain from being a good social listener?
So, I can jump in here. I think thought leaders really are posting their thoughts, their conversations, their research interests, their perspectives for everyone to see, including their colleagues. And so I think some of the key types of insights you can learn. You can understand what their perceptions are on products, what they think of a clinical trial that may be reading out soon or that just was completed, what they think about published data, whether that's from a Congress or from a recent publication that came out. What are their thoughts on that data? There's all kinds of sentiment analysis you can do too around products and clinical trials to get high level perceptions of what they might be thinking. And then, they talk about their treatment, the treatment options, the treatment landscape, what they might consider first lines of therapy, how they're sequencing, what the data gaps are. I think you can really learn a lot. And sometimes there are polls on some of these social media platforms like X. They'll have polls. They have mini ad boards. So you really have thought leaders responding to specific questions, giving their opinions on treatment options, providing education. So I think you can learn a lot about the HCP and what their thoughts are, and generally what um, the HCPs in that space are thinking in general.
Yep. Yep. And I want to get back to, I know one of you guys mentioned the conference preparation and planning strategy and how social listening can help with that. But can you give a little more detail and insight as to what that would look like?
I think one of the cool things about social media is that what was there last year, right? So if I'm going into ASH 2024, I can look at 2023 and see when things got big, when things were happening, and who were the people there to know ahead of time who are the people that are going to talk. So if one of my goals is to raise awareness about something happening, I know I want to talk to those people because they were the ones making the voice last year. And then the same point afterward, when you're listening for what just happened at the conference, when you do that, when you're in that meeting in that conference, we know that most of those meetings are kind of a quick bump into. What better to say was say, hey, I saw that, you had this opinion or you thought this on this trial. That doctor just thought that. He thought the need to share that. Bring that up to him. Dig in a little deeper. Take that insight and that nugget from social media and be able to expand that. And now you're bringing something to your company that even if they have internal social listening, they don't know because you were on the boots on the ground. So you're just taking that and elevated your social listening to somewhere that the headquarters team couldn't even do, providing even more value from those insights as an MSL.
Awesome. So this all sounds great. And I feel like people are enjoying this, taking notes and saying, I have to do more of this. This is what I'm guessing from knowing my audience. But there's got to be some guardrails. There's got to be some words of caution that I would imagine MSLs need to hear. And so, Vandana, can you tell us what are some of the words of caution that you might want to share with the MSLs listening right now?
Yeah, so first, just know what the company, what their guidance is, their general guidance around social listening and engagement. I would be careful not to engage with HCPs on their social channels or via social channels or patients without getting clear guidance from your compliance, legal, and regulatory teams. There's quite a bit of variability across the industry, with most companies, I think, tending to focus more on the listening as opposed to the engagement. So before you engage with anybody on these social channels, make sure you've checked with your internal teams. And then also, I recently saw some new draft guidance from the FDA that came out in July 2024 that talked about addressing misinformation online, and it was guidance for industry. So the policy established was for tailored communications that companies may voluntarily issue via the internet to address any sort of misinformation. And social channels are really susceptible to this misinformation. And so it does give you an opportunity, or gives companies an opportunity to determine how they want to employ this guidance, or if they want to use it at all. But it will allow companies to engage directly on social channels to ensure truthful information is available. So again, discuss everything with your legal, reg, and compliance teams. But I think these are some guardrails that at least I've been thinking about recently.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this tactful stalking thing, right? There's this tactful stalking that's happening, but if you overstep your bounds, it could be fatal. It could be bad. So I think what you said about listening more than engaging, I think is just really good advice, because that's the whole idea here. And this is coming from someone who's very involved in social media, but from a totally different standpoint. Totally different. I'm not an MSL. I don't pretend to be one. So that's why I asked, because I've actually heard people getting themselves into trouble in the past. So I just wanted to mention it. But I know that there's so many other benefits to getting really good at this. And I think one of them, and I want to ask you guys, from a scientific standpoint, staying ahead of new data, for example, how's that achieved through social listening, or can it be achieved through social listening?
Yeah, I think one of the big things to do, and I think a lot of people don't even know this, that you can create lists on Twitter X. So you can put all your HCPs there, you can put the key things you're looking to, and then have a smaller work, flow that you're following. And then once you're in there, you'll know the key hashtags, because HCPs who are the true digital opinion leaders, those DOLs, they're using hashtag lymphoma, hashtag med Twitter, hashtag etc. in your disease state, and they're going to do that every time. So then you'll see what's getting the most engagement when you click on that hashtag. So not only will you know what's new, but you'll know what's most interesting to the people online.
Awesome. Vandana, anything to add?
Yeah, so there's a lot of buzz, before data is released. So I think getting in on that, understanding what some of the HCP concerns are, maybe what data they're thinking about, can really help prep for any of your meetings with HCPs.
Got you.
And one thing I want to turn to, I know we say in jest a lot of time, we're stalking the HCPs, but in all actuality, you're participating in their audience, right? When you're following them and you're just the audience, you're not engaging and following those, your company's policies, but you're in their audience. You wouldn't think it was stalking if your favorite HCP is at the conference and you sat in the audience. That's what you're doing, except digitally. So you're making them happy. You're showing that you care about what they say even more so.
Yeah, it's amazing how mainstream this is. Again, I know I talked about this before, but I mean, this is a mandatory, I think, in this day and age, in order to be successful and stay ahead of things. But to be even more, I guess, to focus on the technology and the technical aspect behind medical affairs, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Gen AI, or large language models, in this conversation. So how do they play a part in social listening?
Well, yeah, the technology is rapidly evolving. Every meeting, conference I go to, everyone's talking about Gen AI and what it can do. And again, moving super fast. But I think one of the good things, and things that these large language models do really well, is summarization of text and improving accuracy of sentiment. So with social listening, you can get a summary now pretty easily of your select HCPs and what they think about a product or what they think about a trial. So I think that summarization can really help move the needle forward, where you get that overall sense of what's going on. Plus, you can obviously always go in and read individual HCP insights. And you can also get summaries of what a particular HCP thinks over 4 or 5, maybe X posts. Also, the sentiment analysis has improved dramatically. With these large language models, the accuracy is way better. So what are they thinking about a specific product? Is it positive? Is it negative? Or a particular trial? So I think some of those things can really help the MSLs as well as everybody else and the HCPs too understand what's going on. And I do want to take it a step further, since Stefan also mentioned Omni Channel. One of the things, one of the data sources that you want to use when you're trying to implement Omni Channel, which many medical affairs organizations are at various stages of this, is to try to incorporate different data sources into a data lake. And so one of these data sources that's really important is what HCPs are saying on social channels. So making sure that's incorporated. And then it gives you the ability now also to more easily analyze data across various channels. So, you can bring in the one-on-one interaction that you've had. You can bring in the HCP insight and an advisory board. You now also have the social listing insight. So you're not looking at that data maybe as siloed as you would, but really thinking about what the HCP is saying overall across all channels, or what the community is saying. So I think those are some ways that large language models could help. And another thing that I've been thinking about kind of comes from the commercial side. So you might hear this, it's sort of another buzzword. They talk about next right engagement. So kind of using these tools to maybe give you a summary of what that HCP is thinking, or maybe even go as far as providing some suggestions. When you go for your meeting and you have your meeting with that HCP, here are some things to think about based on all of what they're saying on these social channels. So it can be kind of a helper, I think a helper tool to provide you with some additional information and insight before you go into your meeting.
Love it. Awesome. So as I'm listening to you guys, I'm starting to think that if MSLs can be consistent with this and can get really good at this, I would imagine it would give them a great advantage. I mean, am I overstepping my bounds by saying that? And if so, like, what would the benefits and advantages be to somebody that gets really good at this?
I think it's huge. Not only is it a benefit to the MSL in building that relationship, kind of we mentioned about being in that audience, knowing how to pre-call plan, but you get really good at this, you're bringing back TA insights, especially if your company doesn't do this formally, or if they don't do it formally for medical. You've now just shown yourself to be that extra, that MSL who's bringing the most value back from that team, right? We're all going to bring insights, and insights are huge for all the MSLs. But if
Mhm.
you're compiling the insights and digging deeper based on what's happening on social media, you're bringing back something special, something real time, and something that the teams may be missing. So when they're asking, who do we pick for this event, or who do we bring to this ad board, you get to bring in that fact that, hey, we think he's a regional KOL from conferences, but look at this on that I've been listening to him. He has people coast to coast sharing, commenting, agreeing. You can bring that, and you'll be sticking out both internally at the company, but also externally with your KOLs.
Awesome. Vandana, anything to add?
No, I think that's well said. Definitely showing value, and also, being able to act on these insights.
Is this, I mean, thinking through this though, is this the same US versus global? Is this, or are there differences in, in US versus ex-US?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely some differences. One of the big ones is the channels. Channels differ across different regions and countries. If we look at the US, you're probably using X, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube are probably some of the main ones, at least within the HCP community when they're speaking to each other. If you look at other countries, China uses WeChat, Weibo. You have Line in other parts of Asia. and then also kind of what they focus on, which channels they may be more active in versus another. And as we talked about before, you really want to meet that HCP where they are. So you want to make sure that you're on the appropriate channel. And then also there are guardrails for data privacy, data protection perspective. So that can influence how you might be able to listen and what guardrails are in place there based on those policies that different countries have. And I think another thing, we've talked a lot about HCP insights and listening to HCPs, but some countries are also listening to patients. And again, there are some guardrails there, but what are patients saying via these social platforms? So I think that's another area that can be different across regions. So
When
some
you
things.
when you say patients, are you talking MSLs or I'm curious as to what you mean, like who's listening to the patients?
Yeah, the MSLs or medical affairs,
Got you.
listening to what patients are saying.
Got you. So what you're saying is this, because the whole time we've been talking about like HCPs and KOLs, but that you bring up a good point. This is a good way to get in touch with what the community's saying.
Yep, for sure.
Interesting. So, Steph, I'll go back to you. Any other words of advice? I could imagine as I think about, and I bring up the global aspect because I know there's a lot of people that listen to this show from different countries. But now I'm also thinking about what some of the other feedback or what I might hear from people like, yeah, Tom, that sounds great, but like, when am I going to have time to do that? Or how do I incorporate that into my schedule? Or how does this affect my metrics or my KPIs? So can you talk a little bit about advice on how somebody can get good at this without, maybe cannibalizing their time or going down a rabbit hole?
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't need to be this giant thing at first. If first see if your company has any resources that they're doing this already. Maybe they have a DLO list and you can see, are your KOLs on that list already? Second, start one step at a time, right? This is you sticking out and providing extra value. No one's asking you to go through your entire, KOL list in a day, in a week, in a month. You're going to see all of them, hopefully several times this year. Before each meeting, take 2 minutes and follow them and add that to that list. So then your next meeting, they're already there. You don't have to go through the list, sit there. And, end of the day, a lot of us who've been MSLs, we know there's some downtime in airports. You know what you can do on your phone pretty easily? You can go check an HCP out, right? You don't have to sit there and try to go through your Viva notes and be squished on a plane. I'm a taller guy, I don't fit there. But you know what I can do all day? I can find someone else on Twitter. I can check out that new hashtag. And it takes 5 minutes a day is going to make a huge difference because if they know no one else on your team's doing it, after a few months, you're going to be there. Just like an MSL, people, how do you compete with the top KOLs? You're reading an article 2 a week, which is more than most HCPs have time for. So similar to that, you'll become the next expert in that, be able to have peer exchanges with the top DOLs on that side too.
Great advice. Vandana, what about you? What last piece of advice would you have for folks as it relates to this topic?
Definitely not to ignore it. I think it's extremely valuable, hopefully, as you can see from this podcast, and be involved. So even if it's only 5 minutes a day, start small. And also talk to your medical affairs leaders. Are they doing social listening? Is it something that they can centralize? Is it something that they can support you on?
Awesome. Guys, this was amazing. I so appreciate you coming on here. I learned a lot. This is such a great topic. And I want to, again, thank our sponsor, Medical Watch. Guys, don't forget to sign up. It's free, medical.watch. I just love this conversation because it's novel, but it's not really novel because it's a thing. We just haven't really talked about it on this podcast. So thank you both for being here, and thank you guys all for listening. And as always, thank you for your support. If you got value in this, please share this episode with your other friends and colleagues in medical affairs, and we will see you next time.